What is going on, guys? We have the new set of One Piece coming up just around the corner, and pre-release tournaments are starting up right now. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on what are the best leaders to play and the best cards that you're going to want to be looking out for when you get into those tournaments. Just a couple things before we start up. Every store is really different with how they work it for the leaders. Some stores will only allow you to play with the new leaders if you pull them there. Some allow you to bring them if you have them already, which I think is kind of unfair. But some stores, I know last time for the pre-releases for 05, they actually let you play with everybody. They made everybody play with the Luffy that would count as all types and all colors and all that. So I don't know how your store is going to do it, but the way that I'm going to suggest these leaders and cards is going to be if the store allows you to bring your own leader from the past, or if they allow you to play with a new leader, whether or not you pull it or not. So getting into the leaders, this is going to be the best leader of the pre-releases. No, hands down, not even a contest. Double attack is just so powerful, of course. Being able to do it every single turn for free, not even having to put it done under your leader. And then I would not sleep on the second effect of this leader as well. Once you get your opponent down to 3 or less life, which just takes one swing with the leader, or one swing with something else if they're playing a 4 life leader. Yeah, the second effect, just to be able to use that 2 Dawn however you want, and just keep putting on that pressure for your opponent. These games are going to go really quickly. I would not be surprised, honestly, if stores end up banning Yamato from being played, because it's just like that crazy in my opinion. And the fact that Yamato could exist in these pre-releases also means that running a 4 life leader yourself is very risky, unless it's Yamato, of course. But because that just means that 2 Yamato swings and you're already at 0 life. So I would not be surprised if 4 life leaders are going to struggle if this card is allowed. But if I was going to suggest another 4 life leader, it would probably be Perona. I mean, I think just being able to rest your opponent's 4 or less characters, which should be a lot of their stuff, is pretty strong. But as we get into the mid game and late game, they're going to be dropping higher cost things than 4. So, I wanted to include some other things here, and this was like a maybe, but probably not. Per usual, Eustace Captain Kidd is one of the strongest leaders that you can use for these pre-release tournaments, because a lot of these tournaments you're not going to have a good deck. You can just assume that you're not going to have a good deck and that your opponents are not going to have a good deck. You're just going to be playing generic cards for the most part. I'm going to be dropping a lot of vanillas, or if they do have an effect, it probably won't even work half the time. So just having a generically great leader like Kidd is going to be so strong, and you're going to be able to push for game in a lot of situations and just like add on the early aggression. So I think this will be the best leader that you could play. It's usually either Eustace, Captain Kidd, or Zoro for the leaders, but the way that the cards are looking this set, I don't think Zoro actually has that many like early game plays that really, not really a lot of 1 drops or 2 drops that have enough power. So I think if you're going to go with the leader from the past, I think Eustace, Captain Kidd is your choice. And then I've got to bring you a little spice here. All right, Crocodile is also a generically good leader in these pre-release tournaments. It does come with a heavy cost of -4 Dawn to use this effect, but you usually want to use it a little later on, just to swing the board a little bit and set up for game the next turn. Once you have more Dawn and you're not really that mad about losing 4. But yeah, this leader actually does have some cool synergies with the Germa cards in the set. So I would actually, if you pull a lot of Germa cards, I would actually be inclined to try this out. Moving on to the cards, I'm going to go in color order here, just as is on the website. And I'll put a link to the website as well, just so you can see all the cards for yourself if you want to check it out. But just a generic rule of thumb for these pre-release tournaments. Like I said before, a lot of cards, like you're not going to have a great deck. A lot of cards are just going to end up being a vanilla. So if a card does have a useful effect, it's probably going to be pretty solid. And vanillas are honestly like pretty okay to run in your deck. A card that has counter, that's one of the main reasons why they are pretty nice, because counter is very strong in these events. And also, any card with plus 2k counter is going to be good. You're going to want to put that in your deck just for the counter. It doesn't matter. I don't care what the effect does. 2k is going to be great. So I'm not going to mention a lot of the 2k just because you should just put all of them in your deck. And it's kind of the same thing with blocker as well. You should probably just put a lot of the blockers into your deck. They're usually very solid as well. You just want as many blockers, as many 2ks as possible. And then you go for the rest of your deck pretty much. Starting off with red, this is literally the only card that I found in red that I think is good besides any blockers or 2Ks, like I said. So yeah, Inazuma, it's a 4/5, not crazy stats. It's got counter as well, but it does have the effect to gain Banish if it gets to 7k or more, which you could easily do with 2 Dawn, of course. Banish is really strong, especially with the few triggers that we got going on in this set. And even if you don't hit a trigger, card advantages everything in one piece, and you're not going to have a lot of draw in general, so hand size is going to be relatively low for each player. So I think that Banish is a strong keyword, and I would recommend this card. Moving on to green, we got Arlong right here. He doesn't have counter, but he makes up for it with this cool effect and his power as well. He's got decent stats. And yeah, you can trash a card from your hand, and up to one of your opponent's rested leaders cannot attack till the end of your opponent's next turn. So just a really solid effect, especially into the late game, especially if you're going against a Yamato as well. Being able to stall them out for that double attack is very solid. And he's got a decent trigger too. Good rule of thumb is that if a card is an SR, it's probably good. A super rare like Hody Jones. His effect does come at a cost because you do have to take your life to your hand, but depending on how the life totals are looking, and if you're playing against a Yamato, then it could line up to be okay, because then a double attack might not do too much. But his effect is really strong, can allow you to clear up the board, and having board advantage is very much like very relevant. I think it's probably going to be better in constructed than the pre-release, but I would still play it. This card right here is one of the best cards, I think, for the pre-release. On play and on KO, you get to KO one of your opponent's rested characters with a cost of 4 or less. And everyone's going to be swinging with their stuff whenever they can. So this guy is going to get value one way or another. And even if he doesn't, they're not going to want to kill him most of the time. Yeah, this card's really good. Obviously, it doesn't have counter because it's so strong, the ability, but I really recommend this card. Then we have You Ain't Even Worth Killing Time. I don't think there's that many good events in this pre-release, but this one's pretty solid. And it's got a trigger to activate the main effect as well. So yeah, being able to KO, I'm assuming you're going to be using the second effect here to KO a 6 or less. And 4 for 6 seems pretty good to me. Just going positive on that kind of effect. It's not the most aggressive card, but still does have a little flexibility with the rest ability as well. The last card for green is going to be Zoro. If you do end up pulling this secret rare, or if you pull it in the alt secret or the manga rare, you know, I don't know if I could recommend playing the manga in the tournament, not gonna lie. I would probably just keep this aside and sleeve it. But yeah, this card is a very strong card. It does cost a lot. You might not get to it because expensive cards. This is why I didn't include the 10 cost Shanks for red. It's just because it is pretty expensive, and these games might go very quickly, once again depending on the Yamato thing. But yeah, this card is very good. If you can get it to stick, you're probably just gonna win the game next turn. So I mean, this card's fire. Next up is Kuzan. Not really such a crazy card. I mean, it's a 3/5, but that's pretty good stats in these tournaments. And draw 2 cards, place 2 cards at the bottom. Just a nice little cycle. Cycle is hard to come by for these pre-releases. So yeah, I like this card a lot. Then we have Sakazuki, who I think is pretty solid as well. It's not so crazy, but you don't really sacrifice too many stats again, and you can bottom deck a blocker. Are people gonna have that many blockers in their deck? Probably not. They're gonna play as many as they can, probably, but for like Yamato, for the kid, so this should be okay. It might get you some value. It's a little tough to not run to run so many counterless cards, but I think this one is pretty solid. Borsalino seems very good as well. It is a 2 cost 4k, so already like okay stats. And if you have 5 or less cards against blocker, which is gonna happen a lot in these pre-releases, you're not gonna have a lot of cards like I mentioned before. You could set it up if you want to aggressively counter out of something to allow it to have blocker. I think this card's solid, but once again does not have counter. And going off this not that many cards thing in your hand, I think Garp is pretty solid too. Gets around blockers if you need it. It's a 5/7. It's already fine with the stats, and yeah, it's probably gonna be active a lot of the time. There are going to be some SPs in this set that are going to be hard to pull, of course, but if you do end up pulling Borsalino, I think you would be a solid include in your deck. These SPs, of course, are from past sets, so, I mean, we already know that this card was really nice in the last pre-release, and it's going to be good again if you get it. I would also recommend playing Sanji if you end up pulling this one, who's another secret rare just like Zoro, and he does have an alt art as well. But yeah, this card is very good, and you're going to be playing mostly characters in your deck since a lot of the events are pretty trash in my opinion for this pre-release. So I think you will always get his effect off. Moving on to purple, which also does not have that many great cards in it, in my opinion, unless you're trying to do the Germa thing with that Croc leader, like I was saying before. But this was like one of the few cards that I could find right here that was pretty solid, which is Zephyr. It's a 7/7 on play, -1 Dawn. And you could KO something that's 5k or less. So just being able to get that board swing, just the swing of the tempo there is very strong in these generic events. And then another SP that is going to be in the set is going to be Miss All Sunday, which is just a ramp card and a draw. You just draw and you ramp. Solid. It has a trigger as well. Black has got some pretty solid cards in my opinion. Starting off with Absalom, who already has like decent stats. He has counter as well, and you could KO a 2 or less character. So honestly, 2 or less characters they have a lot of ways to get removed, but you still probably have to play them for the Yamato. I don't know. But yeah, this card's pretty solid. You don't really lose out on anything since it's from your trash that you're going to be returning cards from. And yeah, just like, it's fine. Of course, Gecko Moria has to be on this list. It's not leader restricted. It's just great. This card is one of the best cards in the set, as you probably know by now. A lot of people are probably surprised that it's not banned or limited already. But yeah, I don't think I really need to say too much about this. It's just, if you get it, you play it. Please play it. Dr. Hogbuck is also pretty interesting to me. Same stats as the Absalom before. It's got the counter, and it has the potential to bring back a card to your hand for free, essentially, by returning those 2 cards from your trash. So as long as you have like okay amount of Thriller Bark cards in your deck, I would probably just run it. Brook also seems pretty solid. Basically just like any card that when you play it, it removes something else from the board is gonna be pretty dang good. Gotta watch out for how much counter you're gonna have in your decks, but this card seems like an auto include to me. Speaking of auto includes, Perona, one of the best cards in the set, gonna be, I mean, it's a 2k and it has such a great ability. Honestly, your opponent might not have 5 or more cards because it is the pre-release, so you might not get this effect off too much, but this is a standout card overall if you get that trash ones especially. And the -3 cost actually might be relevant with a lot of these cards that we've seen already that pop a 2 or less. Yellow got a lot of good cards. Starting off with Inuarashi, who is once again this 4/5 stat line with the counter, but it does have an effect to pop something of equal to less numbered cost than what your opponent's life cards are at. Play it on turn 2, seems very solid to me and should be able to KO something. And it also does have a really great trigger that if your opponent's at 3 or less life cards, you just play it. And we're actually going to see that a decent amount with yellow cards. So you're going to want to play a lot of these cards that have that same kind of trigger. It's just very powerful tempo swing to be able to play it right there for free. Then we have one of the best cards in the pre-release, Onami. One of the best cards in the whole entire set. This card is crazy good. A lot of people are talking about this, especially with Yamato being able to do a double attack banish, and you can use it on your leader, you can use it on one of your characters as well, and it has an amazing trigger, and it has +1k. Just play it already. If you pull multiple, you're the best. I think Kawamatsu is also a fine card to play. It has that same trigger that I was just talking about before, and there could be niche circumstances where you do have a character that has 0 power, especially like some 2Ks that you could put into your life and just get an extra life. Seems pretty good. Seems pretty nice to me. Then we've got Kikunojo, who has that same trigger again. And this is also one of the most powerful cards that we're getting in this set, especially for yellow, which is one of the most powerful colors in the game. This card, I don't really have to say a lot about it. The effect is insane. They're not going to want to clear it, and you're just going to keep getting swings off. It's got 6k power too. This card is very good. Kazuki Hiyori is also a standout card. It is a 2k, and it does have that 0 power threshold, but also you're able to stack your life, so if you have a very good trigger in your hand, you can just set it up. Denjiro, another one of these cards with this trigger, and the effect is like okay. I'm not crazy about his effect, but it's mostly all about the trigger. Nekomamushi does have that same trigger again, and it has a pretty nice effect being able to target your opponent's active characters with 2 Dawn on it. So yeah, I think this card is a very standout card for the tournament. Then we've got You're the One Who Should Disappear, which is the 0 cost event for yellow, where you trash a card from your hand and you give something plus 3k. This card is going to be insane in this tournament because of all the counterless cards that we just went over that are very strong. So if you pull this, I would definitely run this. And it does have the Enel trigger pretty much. It's the same effect as like the Enel leader, where if you're at 0 life cards, if this is your last life when you took it, you can add a card from the top of your deck to your life for just trashing 1 card. This card is exceptional. And last but not least, we have Reject, which this card actually just got banned in Japan. So that should tell you a little bit about how strong it is. But I do think it is a bit less strong in this pre-release as opposed to constructed play, because you do have to take that life card to your hand if you want to use it. But it does have some flexibility, and it can just set you up to win the game in certain circumstances. And it has a trigger as well. So I think this card is going to be pretty solid. And that's my breakdown on the most powerful leaders and cards to look out for in your pre-release tournament. And let me know down below in the comments if you like this kind of video, if it helps you out, if you have some other spicy inclusions that you're thinking about as far as leaders or characters go, or if you just like the content, you know, or if you hate it, just let me know. Thank you for watching. Have a good one. Peace.